Today we have the Big Flyer striped in the shop. You probably watched a previous video where we put it together. But before we get into actually changing the bottom bracket on this Big Flyer, we're just going to go through in this video and talk about the different types of bottom brackets you're going to see on your SC bike, what to look out for, and what to measure before you change out your bottom bracket. So let's get started and just do an introduction to bottom brackets with SC bikes and some of the things that we've experienced and how we change them out here at the Grava store in Wyomissing, Pennsylvania. So the three main types of bottom brackets that we're going to be looking at specifically is the mid bottom bracket, the American bottom bracket, and the Euro bottom bracket. One of the tools that you'll need when you're trying to really figure out exactly what you have is a digital caliper. So the digital caliper we use to measure pretty much how deep or wide or open something is for our bottom brackets, so we can measure the external and internal size. So that's really kind of the measurements that you're looking for when you're measuring your bottom bracket is what is, when I pull up a bearing here, so what is the outer size of the bearing, like this one's 41.3, and what is the internal size of the bearing, which is important because this one's a 19 because we have different spindle types. So with your spindles, you can have anything from a 19 millimeter spindle to a 22 millimeter spindle, and you'll also need to measure that, or even a 24 millimeter spindle. The other measurement you have to do is how long the spindle is. It could be 130, 135 millimeters, 150 millimeters. So you actually need to measure the length of your spindle to get it back correctly what you had before if you're ordering replacement parts for your SC bike. And then lastly, we have our crank length. So if you want that similar feel to what you had before, these crank arms come in different sizes. So it's usually stamped on the crank arm. So this one says LB 175L, meaning it's a 175 millimeter long crank. If you need to measure it, it's from center to center on the crank arm, or you just look at the stamp on the back and order the same crank arm length. So it's crank arm, bearing size, and spindle length, and making sure you get an 8-tooth spindle, or there could be other spindle types when you're doing a conversion. For instance, we're doing the conversion on the Big Flyer. We have not an 8-tooth system. It's specific to the length is the same basically for the spindle length. The bearings are the correct size to go into the mid system that we have on the Big Flyer, and then the crank lengths are the same when we do this upgrade, which we'll get to last. So those are the things you really got to kind of pay attention to when you're swapping out your bottom brackets, and I'll give you some tips and tricks real quick when I go through each system. So the American bottom bracket system, it's the biggest bearing of all. It's like a 2-inch bearing that gets pressed in here. You may have a cup system, so when you take it apart, take a look at it first before you actually order your stuff. Make sure your spindle's correct, and then you just press those bearings back in with a bearing press device, and there's multiple that you can buy out there. We'll put some links on the description of this video of all the different things you can buy to replace your bearings and all the different tools that you would need in replacing your bearing sets on the different configurations. Next up is this PK Ripper. So the PK Ripper here, and some of the beast modes too, will have what's called a Euro. And the easiest way to remember a Euro is basically, besides measuring it, is the Euro is always a screw-in design. So you have these cups or bearings that screw into the bearing section right here. That's what makes it a Euro. So one of the things that we've done recently on a beast mode is we had to replace the bottom bracket that kind of failed on the user who had the beast mode. A lot of the Euros, they'll have double bearings in them, and you want to buy a conversion kit. I wouldn't recommend buying the bearings. So the bearings, you can buy the bearings. Normally with the Euro conversion kits, it's a set of 2 bearings here to distribute the load, but one of the problems is where bearing actually failed on the inside here with this 2 bearing system. So the Euro is not my favorite. It's the easiest to take on and off though, because it's just a screw-in system, but a lot of times you might need a special tool to actually screw those cups in. For instance, we use this Park Tool BBT 22. For this design here, you'll have to clean out all these edges here to fit this tool in and actually unscrew it from your frame. The other tool you can use, and we'll have a link in the description to buy these tools from our website, is there's a bike hand tool. It's the YC-26BB removal tool, and it's the same way. It just fits into this cup, these little teeth fit right in here and allows you to screw on and unscrew these caps. The one thing I will say, when we take apart these SC bikes, a lot of the times there needs to be way more anti-seize grease than there's actually on there, and they can be a real bugger to get off. So when you go to put in your Euro conversion kit, like if you use an Odyssey kit, which we'll link the Odyssey kit also in the description that you can buy from us, you want to go ahead and put a lot of anti-seize grease, really grease those threads up when you put it back on, and that'll keep it from rusting on. Matter of fact, all the bolts that you use on your crankset, all these pin bolts and stuff, all need anti-seize grease. It'll just make it easier when you need to replace a bearing or replace parts to get those off, because when they rust on, we got to start using a hacksaw and hacking these things off because they're not coming apart. Like for instance, this bearing set on this beast mode, these bearings are not coming off. They are rusted onto the spindle. So instead of just doing a basic bearing replacement, which is quite expensive, these individual bearings are $20 for 2 of them. Wouldn't recommend it. I recommend getting the Odyssey conversion kit, but this ain't coming off. So we have to buy a whole new spindle, 8-tooth spindle in here. And as we can see closer looking, we actually had an end bolt here on the spindle break off. Couldn't get that out because it was rusted into the crankset. So now to our project, which is the Stripe Big Flyer, which is a mid-bottom bracket system that we're going to change out with the Rant conversion kit. We're going to put some chrome on here to make it look really good. We got our press fit bearings in here and our dust caps over the top. We're also using a crank system that's not your traditional 8-tooth spline system. So we have a lot more splines here, which helps distribute the load evenly on the crankset, or at least for the crank arms, onto the pedal. The bearings fit over there nice and correctly, as you can see right there. And it also comes with the interior cap cover. And then this is where things get a bit different, because if you're going to other mid systems, the spacers may be used internally with the bearings, or you may have spacers to help on the exterior of the pedal system. So you get different types of spacers to make sure, of different sizes, to make sure you can get it fitted just right into your bottom bracket set here. So this is the main difference here. This is an 8-tooth spline system. This has something like 42 or 44, I can't remember exactly, splines on it, which just fits in a little bit better. So we're going to go ahead and get to disassembly of this mid-bottom bracket, and then put our nice shiny, look at that, crank arms and some of these bear trap purple pedals on here. We're going to add some accents to this bike just on the bottom bracket. So let's go to disassembly. All right, so Aaron's going to disassemble this bottom bracket, and we're going to install the new one. So let's go ahead and just walk through this process and show you how it's done.
First thing you want to do is loosen up. And you can see that.
Yeah, so the chain's got to come off.
15, crank it off.
Yeah. So if you got an old one and it didn't have the anti-seize grease, that may be a booger to get off. But since this is a new bike, they come off pretty easy. The handy dandy Bosch tool. Light work. See that right in there? We see a nice amount of grease in there too, which is good to see coming out of the factory. Don't want to pressure wash your bike, by the way. If you pressure wash in here, you're going to blow this grease out. That's what leads to that rust.
You want to loosen up your securing.
It's pinch bolt.
Take that off.
Boom, there it is. And so we have an 8-spline system. Most of these come with the 8-spline system.
And here's your dust cover. You don't necessarily need to take it off right away, because it'll fall off as soon as you push that through.
So everything's well greased. It kind of comes off just like that. See, dust cover fell on the floor. But yeah, there we go. And there's a mid. And there's the crank. And that's just pressed in. So when you're taking this off and you want to replace it, you're measuring the outside of these bearings and then the inside of the bearings, because you got to make sure your crank is the right size for the inside, and then it fits into the bearing cups.
It's off center in there.
Yep, spacer's off center, exposes a lip of the bearing.
And just take your extension and just lightly tap on the.
Goes.
Don't be afraid to hit these bearings. Pull all the way to the door.
There's the spacer. Bearings all the way over here at the door, flew across the room. And then we'll pop out the other side.
Yeah, don't be afraid to hit them. Because they're, if you're replacing them,
and bearings out. All right, so once you get the bearing out, you're going to go ahead and clean your whole bottom bracket up. If it's an old system, there could be a lot of rust and stuff in there, so make sure that's nice and wiped out and clean. So it didn't have any grease in there, so that would have let it rust over time. But yeah, so we're gonna double check before you buy your stuff. You get these popped out, and then make sure the inside spacing is correct for your mid.
so what we're gonna do, you have to check the spacing between these two flanges here. This flange here, and there's a flange on the other side. You want to check the spacing in between there, so you know how big your spacer has to be. So you can take the flat of your, that's showing like 43.
43.3.
And you use that to order your new bottom bracket. And then you measure the spacer, you know, once you get it, just to double check. It says 51. So we may, so what we'll do.
What was the spacer? Check the original spacer.
The original spacer.
Yeah. So our spacer that came with the rent kit's slightly bigger.
Yeah, they do that so then that way.
This is why BMX is so hard sometimes, is because you got to do all these measurements, and you order the stuff, and then you get some parts may not be exact for your setup. And so the grease is really there for corrosion prevention. I mean, it does help like slip it on, but we want to try to stop the bearings from corroding inside the bottom bracket, inside the frame, because it just becomes so difficult to get everything apart when you need to change it out in the future.
Here's the rift with the bearing on it, so it centers everything. And you can feel about whenever that's centered. Okay. It's not hard. You can do it with one finger. And you can see the bearing sliding in.
Yep, there it goes. Nice and easy. And nice and snug. All right, back it off. Yeah, so if anybody's interested in that 3D printed bearing press set we have, just let us know. Put a comment down. We can create a spot in the store, 3D print them for you, and then ship them to you. Yeah. Yep, there we go. Still works great. And then I say we just use the spacer. Can we use the spacer, the original one? Yeah, instead of grinding down the original one or cutting it, we'll just use the original one. So one of the problems that we have when we do these things, and we're ordering these SC bearings and stuff from these different companies, is that sometimes you don't get all the dimensions for everything. And so you're seeing that right now with the Rant. It's slightly bigger than the spacer that goes inside the bottom bracket and sits over that spindle. So we're just going to reuse the old one. But yeah, double check, triple check all those numbers, because one wrong number with the interior of the bearing or the exterior of the bearing dimensions is going to kind of mess up your whole install, and then you kind of waste some money. You got to return something and then buy something else. So let's press in the other bearing. We do some purple highlights. So we got a wax chain. We wax this chain here. If you want to know more about wax chains, leave a comment in the video description. It does extend the life of the chain and makes it much more quiet when you use it. Grease it up.
Don't forget your spacer.
Almost forgot the spacer. So if we hadn't checked the spacer length beforehand, we got stuck here. We'd have been in trouble because the bearing wouldn't have pressed all the way in on the other side here.
Adjustable wrenches.
is a homemade bearing press.
Hey, it works, man. Saved ourselves 200 or more. Now if you watch, the bearing will just slide in super easy because of it being lubed.
Yeah, there it goes.
Super easy. And everything is lined up. You got
all right, so basically we got the bearings pressed in. So we're gonna talk quickly about spacers going in here. So we'll get that unpressed, and if we have breaks in the video, it's because somebody walked into the store. The store is open right now. But yeah, we'll get the cranks on, and that's it. It's just making sure you lube everything up, put that grease on, that anti-seize grease on all the bolts, and making sure it's not gonna just rust together for you when you gotta do it again.
And there's usually a couple sizes here. As you can see, this one's thicker than that one. So you got 2 thins, 2 thicks. So on this one, this is the stock one. You see we have a spacer here. So you check your spacers to see which one it fits better. Or you can measure it, whatever. But if you have decent eyes, you'll see that this spacer is the same as that one, basically. So on the new one, we're going to use this one. You always put the spacer on the drive side. It's like a rust preventative.
You get the teeth too, right?
Yeah, I do that on the once I put it in, because instead of
Carrying the grease through the thing, yeah.
so you take your crank side. Oh,
You need your cups.
need the cup. Now another tip. Your crank side, the larger dust cover goes on your non-drive side. The smaller one goes on your crank side. And you know, if that's not how it was when you take it apart, just follow how your crank was whenever you took it apart. So you put everything in there.
There it is. Nice and smooth movement. Yep, right over the top. And then we'll put our grease on last.
That can carry the dirt, but on the
These cranks came with the right on there already.
yeah. Now here, your bolts usually come with Loctite on them. But that's all fine and dandy. That keeps it in there. But you want this to get it back out if you need to. So just put a decent glob on there. So then whenever you put it on, you know, it covers the threads. So now with this, you want to put it
Opposite.
opposite of where you're at on the other side.
Yeah, we're all lined up. And so that screw there is meant to kind of help seat your cranks down onto the crank arm. And so, I mean, you could use a rubber mallet and tap them in if you wanted to, but you just need to get it enough where that bolt can seat. And then that helps pull your crank arm down onto the spindle. All right, so we got the crank arm on. Now, if you get the wrong spindle size, that's one of the things we're checking, right, is how long the spindle is. You may have to add a couple extra spacers back on the drive side, but that's all you should need. If you tighten the bolts on both sides and there's still gaps in there, you're gonna have to take it off, put a new spacer on, and then on the drive side, and then close it down again. Yep, so nice and smooth action. So then at this point, we can change out our chain. We have a purple chain we're gonna add. Goes along with our bear traps from SE. Again, we're gonna add a SE section to our website where you can order all these parts that we're just installing right now to help you out with your bike modifications. Now, if you've been riding your bike a while, you won't see that connector pin, so you just use this chain breaker tool at really any pin on there and pop that thing out if you can't find it. But we'll put the chain breaker tool on the website so you can buy one. But yeah, it just threads it, pushes it right out.
You know, measuring it to see where we want to cut, since this wheel is all the way forward, so we can move this off by another link. so we can cut our chain here and still have enough room for tensioning.
Yep, so you need the chain breaker tool to also install your new chain at the right length. So how do you pick the right link here? Does it matter with BMX?
It doesn't matter, but you want to, whenever you have a chain like this that has the pin on it, you see how it's the wide link here,
inside to outside.
Yeah. So you want to make sure when you pop the pin out, the side that you're using is the smaller side to fit in that larger side, because that takes that place there.
All right, so it does matter.
Yes. So we're gonna pop this pin out here.
Yep, so just don't pick any old link. You got to make sure it matches up. And this one will pop all the way out. There it is.
Kind of holds it in place because it's not all the way out. Use the chain breaker.
Now the chain breaker becomes a chain connector.
So once it's on there and there's tension on it, then you just drive it through.
Slide it in.
You just want to make sure it's flush. You don't want to pop it through.
Yeah, and then we twist it and make sure it's and then here's the real test. We got to pull the wheel out and see we got the right measurements done. Yep, look at that.
Perfect.
Perfect. Nailed it. Yeah, we don't go extremely tight on our chain setups. We put a little bit of slack in them. Sometimes we get them from the factory and they're just mega tight and you can feel the tension on the bearings. All right, so that was a mid conversion we did, and it looks good with that chrome and that purple on the striped bike. And we're gonna do more videos like this, so stay tuned. This was like our part 2 video, or part 3 video where we're gonna do, or part 4, we'll see which way we wanna go, but we have some hydraulic Maguras we're gonna put on the back, which we can show you how to do that without wrapping it around your handlebars. And then we're gonna add some other things like some new hand grips, and we're gonna get a different color here on the seat post clamp, and do some cool stuff with this SE bike. So thanks for watching, everybody.
We even got some wheels coming up, so check those.
Oh yeah, we're gonna get some wheels. So we're gonna do some wheel building with these SE bikes with some really cool spokes. All right.